Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm giving you my first impressions of Sand. Sand from Devere Games. Now, this is very much a first impressions. I've only played the game once. I only plan on playing the game once. I usually do not do videos for games I only play once. I try to avoid it as much as possible. There are specific reasons why I'm doing it today, why I'm willing to today, and I will get into all of that. But first I'm going to do the usual, telling you how the game plays, what it is, and then we'll get into my first impressions, my thoughts, why I'm doing first impressions, and well, as much information as I can give about this game and where it is for me. But let's start off with the basics. Sand is a 1 to 4 player game. It's a 1 to 4 player game of pick up and deliver as you try to gather various goods, so you can go ahead and use your sandworms, who are over here in the desert over here. You can be moving your sandworms from location to location in the game, gathering various resources, holding those resources in spots over here, taking up spots from your actual tokens. We'll come back more to that, and then hopefully getting these back to various places on the board where you can turn around and deliver those goods. There's better and worse places to deliver goods, but as you deliver goods, you'll eventually start filling up your own personal queues over here, getting more benefits, either coins, which are points, or unlocking more benefits, upgrading your worm, getting your little token onto the board, your little shelter on the board, so you can start benefiting from that. Doing all of that across 4 rounds or 5 rounds, depending on the player count. At 4 players, you play 1 less round, and trying to get as many points as possible, which are the coins, while you do this. So the core idea is you have sandworms, it's pick up and deliver, you move around the board, you take your actions, and try to do so as efficiently as possible. That's the general idea. To be more specific, to get more into a general cycle, and this will not be a full rules overview, not by any means, but it will give you a general flow of play on this game. The general idea is you have on your turn, you have a certain number of actions. You're going to start the game with only 3 actions per turn. You have 3 spots over here. These are your action spots that will be blocked off. You have 4 possible actions, assuming you're not holding any goods. You have 4 possible actions which correspond to the value of the dice. And so on your turn, when it's your turn, you'll take an action, doing whatever that action does, which is most frequently moving, but it can be other things as well. And you'll go ahead and lock that action. You can do that up to 3 times until you upgrade that token, removing it and getting a 4th spot on your board. That's going to be the general cycle of a round. Now, more specifically, when I said there's 4 or 5 rounds, each round is divided into morning, afternoon, and evening. So you're going to go through that cycle each time. So in morning, I get 3 actions. In afternoon, I get 3 actions. In evening, I get 3 actions. All of that is until, of course, you upgrade and get that 4th action available to you. You'll repeat that sequence of actions across the 4 or 5 rounds, depending on the player count, and that's what your action economy is in the game. But there's a few other things to get into. What are you actually doing? What are the possible actions? And the most common idea, before we get into the actual nitty-gritty of the actions, the most common actions you're taking in the game are either using your dice to move or using your dice to get back water, food, or health from your worm that your worm is expending as it moves around the board. So once again, your most common actions are either spending a dice to move or spending a die to recover the health. It's called the care for your worm action. You're basically either getting back water, food, or health in order to care for your worm to prep them for more movement around the board. The way that's going to work is you can go ahead and look at your starting worm tile over here. Your starting worm tile is going to have small, itty-bitty little numbers over here. You can see them in person just fine, but you have over there a 4, 4, and 6. I think it's a 4, 4. 4, 4, and 6 are the minimum values you need to move across different types of paths. The 4s will cost you fewer resources, but lower dice, and the 6s over here cost you more resources, more health often, but more importantly, the 6s are going to be a shortcut on the board, because whenever you're trying to go to a location, let's say I'm trying to get from here to this city over here, I can either go 1, 2 along these paths, or I can go straight the shortcut over here, which will cost me more health, and it will cost me a 6 value die. So you're trying to juggle how you spend your economy to get to various locations on the board. So you can go ahead, let's say we had a 6 over here, we don't currently, but you do start the game with some coins, which is nice, because you can spend coins and prayers to modify the dice for certain, but not all the actions in the game. So, for example, I can go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to use this 5, I'm going to bump this down over here, I'm going to spend a coin to modify it to a 6, and I'm going to move from here to here, paying the resources of 2 water, 5 food, and 4 health. 2 water, 5 food, and 4 health. I'm starting to already wound my worm, but at least I'm now in the city where I can go ahead and pick this good up. The problem is I've already used that action, so it's going to be a little trickier over there. Let's pretend that I instead used this action and paid an extra coin, and now I have this die available, so I can go ahead and pick up this die, and I'm going to mark that good as being taken. That spot over there, that good is now taken. I can't use it. I can't use that action until I clear up that spot because I'm carrying a good. It's heavy. It's weightlifting. You got more things on your back, literally on your back. From there, you're trying to figure out where to deliver deliver the good. You can always go back to the port cities and deliver the goods, and this is where you'll see there's always a minus or a plus sign because different areas want certain goods and different areas are reluctantly willing to take them. Over here, if you sold any of those goods over here, any of the basic 4 food goods, you get the minus value, which down here is only 1 coin per good. The minus value is 1 coin for the basic goods, 4 coins for the more advanced, and 4 for the more advanced. They have names to them. But then over here, you get the higher values of 3, 6, or 11, or 13 for getting those goods over here, although those have a cost to delivering those as well. That's the basic idea as far as delivery. You look over there, you can also look over here and see these specific villages over here that are variable for setup. They have some goods they don't want, some goods they do want, and more importantly, in any of these locations on the board, if you deliver each of the 2 goods they want, they'll even give you back a more advanced good, which you can then take around the board and figure out somewhere else to sell it. So again, you've seen a basic movement action, you're understanding why you're wandering from place to place to pick up goods, then you wander from place to place to sell those goods. But then you eventually need to recover your values, your resources. So maybe when it gets to the next afternoon, you go ahead and spend your actions, you get your actions back or whatnot, and maybe you spend a red die, which is taken right now, let's pretend it wasn't for simplicity's sake. You gotta spend this die over here to go ahead and recover your food value. So you look over here, it's 5, you go ahead and bump this up and you get 5 more food, so you can spend those same actions based on the values of the dice that are going to be rolled every round to be able to recover your food, your water, or spending both your black or white to get your health. Although there are player bonuses, I don't know how much we'll get into them, but eventually you'll unlock player bonuses. So for example, this player bonus lets you spend your black or your white instead of both to recover your health. This one over here lets you do 2 movements in a single action. This one lets you stack additional goods. And this one requires a whole mini exploration of how you actually turn resources into these little gray resources to be able to sell them for the higher value. I'm not going to go into it, but the last one kind of lets you sell special resources with a trade-off and a cost as well. That's basically most of the actions you're going to do. There's a few other actions you can take. You can spend a die to place a song into a city. Songs in cities will mean that the more songs you have in cities, the more resources, the more points you'll get, coins you'll get whenever you sell goods. You're more renowned. It's also going to be worth points at the end of the game if you have those there. You can also go ahead, when you sell the lower resource here, you'll get these benefits over here, which are worth the points shown, but if it has the most at the end of the game, we'll also get a bonus 12 points. You're also going to have these resources over here. When you sell 4 of these, when you sell 4 of any basic good, you'll gather these, and that will give you extra money for selling those basic goods. And you're slowly filling these different tracks down here, getting various benefits, including putting your shelter out. Your shelter has its own little fun game where you can put your shelter onto a spot on the board, and then you can use these acolytes. Your shelter can store goods, you can start storing goods there, but you can also use acolytes at various locations to be able to say, hey, look at this, I actually don't have any good matching acolytes, let's move these here. If you have these acolytes in this location, I can say, look, I'm going to use this white acolyte, I'm going to take an action with the white die in the city with the white acolyte and send this to my shelter by paying them a coin. So there's some still interesting side things like that. And then lastly, there's going to be the cards at top. And again, I say lastly, I know I have not covered everything. I haven't covered the unique asymmetric abilities. I'm covering a basic idea of the flow. I don't want to get into all the nitty gritty over here. But lastly up here, we have these cards over here, which you'll take at the end of every full sequence of rounds, of every 3, morning, afternoon, and evening. And you can either get a one-time benefit right away, or you can go ahead and get something that if you deliver certain goods at the end of the game, you'll get those points for those goods. You get those extra things. Those are going to come out every round. They get a little easier as you progress because the first round you have more information to work towards, and in later rounds you have less of that. That's the basic idea of the game. The basic idea is you have your actions, you have 4 or 5 rounds, depending on the player count. You're going to have 3 cycles per round. You'll spend your action tokens to be able to go ahead and utilize. There's some other aspects of like dropping off goods in the desert, abandoning goods, and you'll get your action back. There's some other things we're not getting into, but the basic idea is spend an action to move, spend an action to heal and get your resources back, and try to find the right pathway of goods and resources, all that you need to do to be able to get as many possible points in this game as you work through sand. Which is where we'll dive into my first impressions. And it's not positive, but it's not the worst either. And I'll try to give context. I want to split things up because I want to split things up very strongly into 2 different things. The rules and the game. Because those are different things. But first and most basic idea to give you the thing is this is a first impressions. I usually am wary of giving first impressions, with exceptions of certain type situations. If I'm covering a prototype that only has a scenario, that's one thing. But I usually try not to give first impressions, especially if those first impressions aren't positive. And to be frank, my impressions over here of this game aren't positive. I generally love Devere games. I either love them and keep them, or I like them a lot and move on from them. But I've generally been very impressed with Devere games over the past several years. Sand is definitely an exception for me, although again, I want to heavily differentiate between the game, which I don't think is for me, but I think is a good game, and the rulebook, which I just think is bad. But going back to the first impressions, the reason I'm willing to do a first impression of this one, because I'm usually much more hesitant. If I only played a game once, like maybe it's just me, maybe not, I don't know. But this is a game that I played with 3 other content creators. There's 4 content creators around the table who at all had or are getting the game, and one of them had even gone through and already played the game and read the rulebook, and the others were constantly referencing the rulebook, and all 4 of us were seriously struggling with the rules. I read through the entire rulebook. It was a slog. And to be frank, I'm still not 100% certain I'm playing this game correctly. But I also know that I was playing with somebody else who already played the game who wasn't any better off, and while it's entirely possible that the 4 of us just were struggling in its own way, I think if you have 4 people who professionally read rules for a living, and they're all experiencing the same struggles and issues, I'd pass around this rulebook, point to like 2 paragraphs and be like, can you please tell me what that means? The amount of times that happened with many content creators, including some who weren't even playing the game, I don't think it's a good rulebook. The rulebook actually even makes a point of saying at the beginning, you know, how rulebooks are structured in different ways and there's lots of different things going on and it's a whole thing comes together. And I get that. Rulebooks, I find, some rulebooks are better suited to how I like to learn games, some not as much, but wherever they are. And I don't think Devere in general, their games, they're not always the simplest. They have heavy games. They have very rewarding games that I really enjoy for the most part. And I haven't always thought their rulebooks are necessarily the best, but this by far to me is the worst rulebook I've seen. And the reason I'm harping on that point is because I think there's a pretty decent game at the other side of it, even though it's not for me. We'll get to that part soon. But I think it's important to talk about bad rule books because, first of all, you're buying this game. You should know what you're getting into. That's the point of a review or first impressions. But also to know that if you can power past that, if Rodney Smith, Watch It Played, puts out a video on how to play the game and you can get the rules information otherwise, then I recommend you do that because I think this rule book requires a lot of rereading and double checking and triple reading a paragraph because it's just not clearly presented in the information it's trying to convey. And there will 100% be that person in the comments who's like, I had no problem with it. And I'm glad you didn't. But myself and many others did. If it was just me, I'd be hesitant. But a bunch of people have had an issue with this one. So the rules are a problem to begin with. That's kind of the main reason I'm willing to give that first impressions is because of that aspect, is because multiple people had their hands in the pot. I didn't enjoy the game enough to want to play it again, but I do want to talk about the game, and again, I had multiple people at the table with the experience. There are other things to note here. But before I get into the other things, I do want to say that I think that if you like tight games, it's not going to follow my usual structure for reviews. I think if you like tight games and pick up and deliver, I think Sand is a good game. Genuinely so. I think it's a good game with one asterisk I'll give you. But I think that it's a very good game with a lot of tight action economy, with upgradable characters, with ways to optimize, ways to try to find your pathway forward, vying for those goods, delivering those goods, finding your right pathway forward. I think if you like tight games and pick up and deliver, there's a good game after the bad rules, although I'd recommend not playing it at 4 players, at least based on what I'm seeing so far. If you don't like pick up and deliver, and if you don't like tight games, I think this is very much both of those. For me, I don't like pick up and deliver. There are a few notable exceptions. Xia, Legend of a Drift System, Mythwind. I think there's a few... Is it Mythwind or Mistwind? Mistwind. I think there's a few games that have done pick up and deliver that I have liked. For me, it's not a mechanic I typically enjoy, which means that past the bad rulebook, while I did not enjoy this game, I think that's primarily because this game is 98% pick up and deliver, which means this 98% mechanic I typically haven't enjoyed as much. But if you do like pick up and deliver, then it's a very tight game. Tight games don't bother me. Tight games are situational. Salt and Sea from Devere Games, a recent game that came out, I think is delightfully tight. There's so much of a crunch going on, and I really enjoy that one. I find tight games are case by case. Some I really enjoy, some not as much. For me, I didn't enjoy this one, but more so because the pick up and deliver than the tightness. The tightness I can work my way past. As far as other things to talk about in this game, again, I mentioned already, the rules are terrible. I think that's a big deal. I think the player count concern is a very present concern. This is a game that I played at 4 players, only at 4 players, and usually I do try to play games at multiple player counts, but frankly, I didn't want to play this game again, because like I said already, for a variety of reasons, it started off with a bad rulebook, which didn't start me off on a good foot, but then from there as well, I just didn't enjoy the 4-player game enough, and that it's a question of how much do I really want to power through a lower player count. But you get less done in a 4-player game, significantly less done. There's 2 issues with a 4-player game. The first is that they take out an entire round of play. That's to make the game length palatable, which is better, for sure. But it also means that the game structure about how much it looks like you can or should get done versus what you actually get done is just really not present. It's really not. And to be clear, by the way, I won the game. And I only say that because when you have situations like this, it's very easy to assume that, oh, well, you didn't get it, you didn't process it. No, I won the game. It still wasn't the game for me. I usually don't talk about whether I won or lost as part of a review. It's not a relevant factor, but I'm talking about how much I struggled and how much tight it was. It's easy to be like, oh, you didn't get it. Maybe, but I got it enough to win. But I think that the tightness and the removing the 4th round while having everything else balanced around that extra round, or 5th round, maybe the 5th round, while having everything else balanced around that round makes it for a much tighter experience, even for things as basic as getting these starting goods that you get. You're going to have a full round left, and you're vying for more goods. The game setup amount, as far as the goods on the table, don't change at 2, 3, or 4 players, and so you have more fighting over fewer goods or the same amount of goods with less rounds of play, and that means I think 4 players is an even tighter experience where genuinely, like, I think I filled up, part of this box and 2 goods from this box. I think that's what I got in the game. I think you could probably do better if you got more plays in, but the idea of getting like full boxes, like no one, I had the most deliveries of cubes in the game, and it still I got the feeling that I got like nothing done, and I feel that feeling would be better at a lower player count with more room to do stuff, but it's just a frustrating overall experience. And I completely get, I think there are other games I've played that I don't always love certain player counts. Apiary is a good example of a game that I happen to not like Apiary at 5 players. I like it at 2, 3, and 4 players. I don't like it at 5. Because at 5 players in Apiary, and I know we're talking about another game here, but it is what it is. This is not my standard review. At Apiary, when you play Apiary at 5 players, you simply get less done. There's not balanced around it, they just took out less stuff. There's less things. The game is just shorter to accommodate for that, and that's just less satisfying to me. If I had only ever played Apiary at 5 players, I would like it less. And so it's worth you knowing that. Maybe I just played it at the worst player count, and this is a better game at lower player counts. The flip side of that is, to me, when a publisher puts a player count in a box, they are owning the statement that the game works at that player count. And as much as it is true that I should play at other player counts, and you probably should, if you're interested in this game, look for reviewers who played at other player counts to see if that makes a difference, by all means. But to me, if a publisher puts a player count in the box, they are owning that player count. By Devere putting 4 players in the box, even though I think it's probably the worst way to play the game, it is the experience they handed me. It's the experience they handed me by not telling me it's a 2 to 3 player game or a 1 to 3 player game, or not putting an asterisk like, hey, by the way, it's just 4 players is less fun, and maybe they don't think 4 players is less fun. That's all fine. But for me, it's their player count to own, and I had a bad experience at that player count because I got even less done on a game that already had a bad rulebook and is already a very, very tight experience. Past those issues, past the player count, past the rulebook, the game itself is actually fairly rewarding. If you get past those issues, and of course past the fact that I don't love pick up and deliver. But there's a lot of growth in the game. There's a lot of growing things up. You're going to be going ahead, you're going to have all these player abilities you can unlock in different orders. You're going to have asymmetric player powers that will start you off over here, and these are wildly different and very fun. You're going to have a worm that upgrades and slowly removes the spot over here, gets better, gives you some resources, gives you better economy of moving around the board, and eventually upgrades again, giving you an even better worm. So you have a little worm that's growing up. You have all these little paths of how to upgrade different things. You have multiple pathways trying to deliver these Irakuru rocks over here. It's going to cut you off from some other benefits in the game. You can no longer score these goals, but you get a much higher return of a track that fills up faster with coins, a higher delivery ratio, and all you have to do is get some advanced goods and go over here and have these people turn these goods in, have these people turn your better goods in cities with your shelter, and figure out the economy of there. The acolytes are a fun little system of being able to ping things around, although they are very luck dependent. You can have rounds, like you saw, I looked around the board, none of the acolytes were actually functional in that first round of play. That can happen, but otherwise you can have acolytes where you can ping resources around the board and take advantage of the placement of your shelter, while also taking advantage of the cycle of how to abandon goods to be able to go ahead and get your actions back on a future round and be able to drive your engine forward. It is a tight game though, because you're frequently picking up goods, and those goods are going into your caravan, locking down your actions, so you can't wander around the whole map just holding a bunch of goods. Until you upgrade some stuff, you can't afford to wander around the entire board with a worm that's just powered forward by nothing, with the goods that are blocked off in their spots. But if you can get past that, if you can find the patterns, you can put out your songs. There's a character whose power is their songs can't get removed, which means you can start bumping out other players' songs, because I didn't tell you this, but you could remove other songs otherwise. But you can start bumping out other players' songs, start getting extra resources per delivery, start going for those cheaper goods. Don't worry too much about the expensive deliveries, just focus on cashing in extra coins for every more easily gotten basic good. There are multiple pathways towards victory here. There's tableau building, there's player powers, there's a bunch of things that are actually rewarding once you get past the bad rulebook, once you get past the player count, which I think 4 is not the best way to play it, and if you are someone who likes pick up and deliver and tight experiences. That's kind of where I am on this one. Rating wise for me, I'm going to go to final thoughts at this point. Again, this is very all over the place, not my typical what I like, don't like, and see as not liking review. For me, final thoughts wise, I'm giving this a 2 out of 5. And it's a combination of 2 things. One is, for me, the gameplay mechanics are not the type of gameplay mechanics I like. That is not a fault of the game. I don't like pick up and deliver. So for me, this is not an experience. And make no mistakes, I knew it was a pick up and deliver game, but I have enjoyed pick up and deliver games. It's just very situational. And because of how much I appreciate Devere, because of how good their games have been, I was like, oh, this one might work for me. And unfortunately, it didn't. So the 2 out of 5 reflects a combination of things, some of which I think are fair to criticize, and others are just my own personal opinion, because that's ultimately ultimately what a rating score is. So the pick up and deliver stuff, if you like pick up and deliver, I think you can look past part of my rating. Part of my rating, though, is around the player count and around the rulebook, which I think are on Devere, ultimately. And again, maybe it's just a me thing, and if it's just a me thing, it is what it is. But it's certainly not just me, at the very least. The question is, how localized is this problem? I don't know, but we all struggled through the rulebook, and we all felt it was a very, very tight experience that was, and to a large extent, biased by that 4-player game, by the fact that you just get less done, and in order not to make the game draw out too long, there's already a 2+ hour experience, it could become a 3-hour experience if you try to have that extra round there. So for me, it is a 2 out of 5, although there are a variety of factors that feed into that 2 out of 5. I think if you like pick up and deliver and tight games, this is worth looking at. And I think if you don't, you should probably skip on this one. For me, for other game recommendations, I'm going to give other games from Devere themselves. First of all, Salton Sea, and specifically I actually want to give Salton Sea because Salton Sea is also a really tight game. You will struggle with that one, but I had a lot of fun with that one. I'll have a review coming out at some point. Haven't actually reviewed it yet, but Salton Sea is delightful. It's going to be an incredibly tight experience, but it's not a pick up and deliver. Lots of hand management cards and all that stuff, but very enjoyable experience. And then the White Castle, which again, another tight game. I'm specifically giving tight games because I really think there are other factors at play. I think that it's very easy for someone to look at me not liking this game and be like, oh, you just don't like tight experiences. And I think it's situational, it depends. But the White Castle is going to be another game that I recommend. It's you only basically have 9 actions in the entire round, and you're trying to fight to get everything done within those 9 actions. But it's a really clever, well-designed game that gives you a lot of room to explore within those 9 actions as you try to optimize towards the best outcome. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. This is a slightly different one. I'm very hesitant to be critical after one play, but there are a variety of factors here that let me be willing to do so with a little bit more comfort. I think if you like pick up and deliver, give this one a shot at a lower player count, not 4 players, and see if it works for you. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.